Welcome to the broadcast, everybody, and greetings from my salon. We're going to be discussing royal matters and Meghan, Sussex, later in the broadcast, but we're kicking off with something a little bit different. So skip ahead if you will, if you want, but we're going to start by covering this very important topic that came up in the news a few days ago. It was regarding the station GB News and regarding advertisers who have been pushed away and cancelled for working with GB News, and the fact that one of our beloved, trusted brands here in the kingdom, Marks & Spencer, the supermarket and homeware and food hall, Marks & Spencer, took the risk in advertising with GB News. And this should not be news. A few years ago, it would have been par for the course and gone by without a word, a good few years ago now, I suppose. But in 2025, oh, shocking. This is quite a development. It's so difficult for stations like GB News, but GB News in particular, to find people to support them. Now, I'm not a huge enthusiast of GB News. I'm not an unadulterated fan. I can give or take GB News. There are some presenters I like, some I don't. So it's not about being a fan of GB News per se. It is about being a fan of the fact that a channel like GB News even exists, because we were hearing so much from one side of the argument over the last few years. Before GB News came along, there was no mainstream or approaching mainstream alternative for alternative views. We were being prescribed all these narratives and ideologies and philosophies that you just simply have to go along with, which is unhealthy. There should always be a balance, and it provided balance, didn't it? Well, Marks & Spencer, who have been going since the 1800s, by the way, I wrote it down, 1884. If you don't live here in the kingdom, they are a trusted quality brand. I'm a great fan of their food hall. Of course, in the wake of them taking the decision to advertise with GB News, there has been a furore from all the usual suspects. Stop funding hate. All of these really rather sinister organisations and campaign groups who orchestrate and galvanise a very small part of society, minority voices, but they funnel them very successfully and professionally to make a loud din online, to troll companies and brands, to show their displeasure and complain in their tens of thousands, to scare them and frighten them into opting out of advertising with, be it GB News or many other types of channels and platforms. And individuals, of course. And 9 times out of 10 or even more, it is involving individuals or organisations who share the same views as the vast majority of people in this country. Anyway, this is the shocking thing. The views and opinions that are shared on GB News are not rare. They are not radical or extreme views. They might be right or wrong or somewhere in between, but they are still popularly held views that are valid and deserve to be aired. Well, these campaign groups are of course springing up and asking their followers to make a great big noise and protest. They have the right to do that. We are a free country, ostensibly. They have the right to do that. But I am here today to urge you to do the same. If you're here in the kingdom, if you happen to dwell online, and if you're in agreement, then model goodwill and courtesy and express your enthusiasm to the likes of Marks & Spencer and your gratitude for the fact that they had the balls to advertise with GB News, because they must have known that they would be taking a bit of a risk. Well, it's not as big as a risk as all these big brands and advertisers fear that it is. In fact, it will actually behoove them to align with all kinds of fruits that are in the basket. Perhaps give them your custom. Now, as I was looking at this story online and reading various articles and looking at the social media posts, a tweet or an X, whatever it's called, popped up from someone who is loosely associated with his channel, or rather his sister is. And so this is slightly awkward for me to mention this because we have a fruit among us and her name is Jacqueline, or Jackie. I'll say Jacqueline, your full name, my dear, who I adore, by the way. She is a very long-term basketeer. She's wonderful. We've interacted. I've introduced you to her before, and her brother's work, because her brother sounds like a fantastic man by all accounts. He actually received an OBE from Princess Anne last year, which we discussed. He was a great friend of the late Terry Higgins, and you'll know about the Terry Higgins Trust and all of its work related to HIV and AIDS and this kind of thing, and he's been rewarded for that work, and he co-founded the Terry Higgins Trust. So it's slightly awkward because his name rang a bell. His name's Martin Butler, OBE. So Jackie, my dear, please know that I say this with all due respect, and also by reminding any viewers here who might take umbrage at your brother that I'm sure he is a lovely man, it's a well-meaning man, so there's no ill will from me towards him here, although there is a raised eyebrow because, you know, his posts get a lot of views, and one of them has got over 1 million views in the wake of this controversy. He has been calling for all of his followers to complain at Marks and Spencer and follow their complaints procedure about this advertising on GB News, and it's really sad. It's really sad. And I would imagine, Jacqueline, that perhaps you don't quite chime with your brother's views on this, which is entirely natural. I have very different views to my siblings, so I get it, and I don't want to assume what your views are, Jacqueline. But it is sad, I will say on my behalf, that people in our lives become what I perceive to be as radicalised, and perhaps they feel the same about us. I understand that, but it's really sad, and we all need to be vigilant against radicalisation, all of us, because in this digital age and the age of online tribes, most platforms, including YouTube, I'm sure, and X, everything else, they encourage a very narrow field of vision, don't they? The algorithms bring you what you want to see most of the time, and here it is dangerous. Actually, I was in a Zoom meeting very recently with a female celebrity and about 5 or 6 other people. And as we were talking for about an hour and a half, 2 hours, the topic turned to the politics of America, because this is a female celebrity in America who was hosting the meeting. And it became very clear that they were all very, Democratic Party voters and followers and very left-leaning, which is fine. Most of my friends are slightly left-leaning, so that's nothing unusual to me. But what was slightly awkward, and this happens quite a lot, is the fact that they, as we were talking, assumed that I felt exactly the same way as they did, and various topics and subjects came up, as you can imagine, in light of the recent election and the fallout of that, and all the various, letters community, hot topics that come up, trans issues, all of it, and it was just assumed that I was in alignment with their views. Well, I've learnt better over the years, and I learned to keep my trap shut. They don't need to know what I do agree with when it comes to their thoughts and what I don't agree with. But, I have learned over the years to take a breath and step back and say, well, what can I actually learn here? Going into combat with them, or saying, well, actually, this is what I believe. And what I've come to know isn't really that important at all. And it's actually rather more important for me to hear them and hear why they have their passions and their views and their feelings. And I actually got educated about certain things and learned certain things in that conversation. Activism is all very well and good and has its place, but it must be held to account. There is a responsibility that comes with activism for the effect that it might have on the lives of others and the repercussions to many parties. From the damaging effect on individual liberties and individual livelihoods and careers and finances, all the way to freedom itself. If this issue is important to you, then I would suggest that you educate yourself on who is pulling out from advertising on various channels or platforms under pressure, and consider how you support their brands. Who is caving into the mob? Is it justified that they are doing so? And are they aligning with the mob? Who are you going to reward with your hard-earned pennies? I am less interested in who to punish, but who should your coin reward? It's not about withdrawing, taking away and punishing as much as it is about celebrating those and rewarding those who are for common sense and for a variety of opinions. In this kingdom, be mindful and be vigilant and make your appreciation known, as I am doing now. That is the reason that I have taken the time to make this segment on this broadcast to encourage the enthusiasm for quality brands here in the kingdom, to support not just GB News, because heaven knows GB News have got their own issues when it comes down to clamping down on freedom of speech as well. I'm aware of that. I'm not saying that they are a perfect model whatsoever, but it's certainly a step in the right direction, and that's encouraging. Queen Camilla has been enjoying a wonderful day in Kent, the Garden of England, in Canterbury actually. And the most exciting news of the day came out when she told somebody that she has got a new puppy, a new rescue puppy. Do you remember in November we lost little Beth? Bluebell and Beth, little Beth Shand, died in November, so the Queen has been more dogless than usual, but a new dog has come along in the form of little Moley. The new one is called Moley because he looks like a mole. I don't think that means that he looks like Meghan, but anything's possible. The new puppy is 8 weeks old, and she was asked what breed the dog is, and she said a bit of everything. Looks just like a mole. Well, we need a photo, don't we? We need a photo. Very excited to see the new edition, little Moley. And Camilla was meeting dog lovers at the Beanie House of Art and Knowledge, and she unveiled a life-size statue of Aphra Behn, who was a playwright and poet of the Restoration era. Very interesting, actually. She was one of the first women to earn a living as a writer, and she was the literary role model for generations after her. Very influential, and she was employed as a spy by King Charles II. And King Charles III spent the day in Staffordshire, where he was visiting JCB in Rochester and the Tower Brewery in Burton-upon-Trent. Celebrations were underway for the 80th anniversary of JCB, meeting employees and apprentices on the factory floor. Founded in 1945, JCB is one of the world's largest construction equipment companies and employs 7,500 people in the kingdom. His Majesty walked the assembly line, viewing the digger wheels as they were fitted. JCB was granted a royal warrant this year, and the King also met 100-year-old Ken Harrison, the last known surviving member of the original production team from 1953. And then it was off to the pub, the Tower Brewery, who are continuing the long tradition of brewing in Burton-upon-Trent. The King had a tour and pulled a pint. Alec Gilroy, eat your heart out, and he opened the brewing steam hatch. Well, the Duchess of Sussex has been up to her usual tricks, and of course it was time to pull out the Diana card, wasn't it? A week to go till her launch. Of course it's time. Of course it's time to pull out Diana. She's pulled out the children a little bit, made reference to Prince Harry in a recording and her little montages, and now it's time to go for the mother-in-law. Owen R. says, "Hello River, have you seen the images of the Duchess of Sussex wearing a northwestern jumper? I was reluctant to believe the rumours that Prince William forbade the Duchess from wearing tiaras and other items of jewellery worn by his late mother, but now I have every reason to believe they could be true. Meghan is trolling in a vile way. Is Harry oblivious to this?" Well, it appears so, doesn't it, my dears? Unless he's just enjoying the fact that she's trolling everybody. That could be entirely possible, by the way, and in fact is likely. My understanding from what I know so far is that this sweater that she's wearing, this Diana sweater, you know, the whole thing was made famous, at least here in the kingdom, by Diana. No one had seen the purple sweater before, and she was very famously pictured in it. My understanding, though, is that this one that Meghan was wearing is not Diana's cast-off, but is available online. There's a ribbed version, which I think she's wearing, available on Nordstrom. Forgive me if I'm wrong. It might be Diana's that she managed to find in the mothballed closets. But my understanding so far from what people are saying is that this is a new one. Well, I will put the quiz to basketeers, bearing all this in mind. For those of you who have lost mothers and mother-in-laws, very sadly, I would suggest that wearing or even cosplaying in a garment of your late mother's that held special affection for you, or for any reason at all, just to remind yourself of your mother, is entirely normal and natural, or any late relative. But how many of you dress up in the cast-offs or the cosplaying cast-offs of your dead mother-in-law? Is that a thing? Maybe some of you who are close to your mother-in-laws, there are some lovely ones out there. I know that's a maybe, but that's for you to answer. But, you know, even I'm talking about the cast-offs that even Paul Burrell didn't keep to herself. Well, Ellen, William isn't in the habit of forbidding anybody to do anything. And even if he was tempted to do so, he's wise enough to know that forbidding Harry to do anything, or Harry's kinfolk, would be red rag to a bull. He would have learnt that many years ago, my dear, as an adolescent, and before. Don't bother telling Harry what to do, because he will run in exactly the opposite direction and do that very thing. Well, in fairness to Meghan, we must consider the fact that she is, of course, an alumnus of Northwestern University, so we must take that into account. Nobody, I don't think, has ever seen her in this sweater before, but perhaps she had one or was sent one, who knows. She did a double major in theatre and international studies. How appropriate. So in any other context, it would be quite natural, wouldn't it, for her to have a garment associated with the university that she attended. Of course it would, but in this context, on this week, this is what we're talking about, my dear, in the promotional trailer for her trailer trash vehicle, this is when she decides to parade it about. And I told you, didn't I? What did I tell you? She's going to bring out a fruit basket. And of course she has. Of course she has. This one seems to be holding oranges. It looks really lovely, actually. But that's my domain, darling. First blooms and blossoms of the year. She shows us from her shack. I often refer to that Castle of the Riven Rock as a shack, but I will tell you, it does look absolutely beautiful, doesn't it? There's no denying. Wherever it is, absolute heaven it looks like, doesn't it? It looks absolutely gorgeous, absolutely idyllic. But it's the timing, isn't it? It's the timing of this vulgarity. Fully aware of the Diana connection, she is, be in no doubt of that. She knows that Diana was connected to that sweater. And she is fully aware that she is consistently compared with Diana and accused of plagiarising Diana's style. Sometimes accused of using that style to muscle in on Harry's own affections and confuse the boy. Well, she encourages that criticism flagrantly and brazenly. The girl is brazen. She encourages it by choosing this garment at this moment. So what does she expect when she complains about the media going on about it? She thinks she's being clever and manipulating the media in Diana's own style herself, and perhaps she is. Well, every moment is contrived. Stay fruity on royal duty and channel the royal spirit.